How do we identify ourselves and set in sequence, guys? How do we get in our positions to understand how to see its settings? Is know exactly how to see our digital imprint of our own design, is to see yourself just waking up to our cells and creating everything from the sun to the moon or anything in travels that indicates our systems, how we see it through our alteration settings of our egos, and how to create it through our costumes of design that's already set up for us to understand through story. That's all this is, nothing else. Your body is here, but not here, but here all the time. So what you have to start identifying, the body itself is consciously aware of everything of itself. It's identified of its into of itself. It knows exactly where it's always is. So it's the existence of nothing that formulates everything of nothing, that it perceives everything of consciousness. Coming into the mind of stillness, coming into that position of collaboration and partnership with itself at higher frequencies, a higher sensitivity. And for you to process that is truly to see everything around its own system of its own consciousness. You have your life, they have theirs. Now this is a higher levels that we have to come into, is the windows itself. Seeing everything through a window, seeing everything through a graph, seeing everything through intelligence. Know exactly how we come in that position through abstractions. So for example, like I said before, is truly understand how to see yourself, is to identify yourself and really look at it and really try to understand it. So knowing exactly what's going on is the body's in conception already, existing and everything happening all at once. So the body's not here or there, but everywhere all at once. It has to be, because it's already done everything through its system. Eternity, internal beings of you, as dimensional beings of light, there's nothing to process. The only thing you have to come into the body of, understand how to use the eyes, is just to observe everything that's already done through its equations. And there's so many ways of looking at that. For example, to understand the consciousness of where it came from is to understand its source, the recognition that you brought in through attraction. But it's how we appreciate things and stop seeing things from the outer side and start seeing things from the inner side. The inner side set position, not the outer side settings. So if you get in position and stop seeing things from outer shell, you start to see the things from inner self at set position to its consciousness, its intel. So for example, you have a pen, okay, and you pick up the pen and it's in a jar. I just want you guys to identify these things, how powerful consciousness is in set positions. You take it out of the jar, okay? You write a note, or what are you doing then, right? You don't put it on the table, you put it back in the jar because it affects the table. Why? Because the table doesn't recognize the frequencies of which you're putting your positions of as you put the pen on the table. So it's affect the table and everything that's on its table. You understand that? So when you finish the pen, you put it back in the jar. Now, this is a higher sensitivity that we have to understand how to see through all levels of its consciousness. It has its own system that governs its own space. And for you to identify that, it's just to observe everything, to see what goes on with its own system as it goes through its own space of its own time, in its seconds, minutes, and hours. Everything existing all at once. So that's just a practical, logical system, how we come into that through calculation settings. Anything that you touch, information system, interactions. What made you pick this up on the left hand and not on the right hand? Are you identifying that you picked this up on the left? This is identified how you pick things up, or does it want to be picked up on the right? If you're not consciously aware, you're not consciously aware what it isn't, because you have to identify what it is. It just looks like you, but it's its own system of its own operation that wants to be picked on its left, and wants when position one thumb and position one finger, not two fingers, not three, and don't pick it up like this, because you can't. It can't see you. You covered its face. And then you put it back down to where it was, not where it wasn't. So put it back every single time for where it is. Understand that? Don't leave things behind, because it goes vortex back to its position, and you don't understand these things because it vortex and disappears and you have no idea where it went. That's how you lose things in combination. Understand the calculation setting to its intelligence adds lines of all communication to its formation lines of grounds. This opens all signal location system, how you see things in travel. But you have to be specific on certain lines of signals, especially when you pick things up, and how you put things back where it's supposed to be, which is its whole top golf, back with everything else. So if there's 3 pens in there, you put the 3 pens back in setting, right? If you take 2 pens out, you put them on the table, don't do that, because now you change the frequency of the table. You're not identifying the tail by its own intelligence until you identify that system. You pick up the 2 pens and put it back in the jar. So the 3 friends or the 3 pens are back where they are. Okay? This is what you have to come in positions of. Identify that through all non-lock communication setting. Everything in track core centers in that communication system. If you get a cube center line connection system at flux, the 3 centers of travel, direct lines of grounds over lines of settings, that process of communication is all through traction. Okay? All through setting. But what you have to identify, it has a phase facade. It's a travel. Okay? So as soon as you touch it, it doesn't like that. It can't see. Right? See, you can't see. See its eye? See a full eye? Now it's squinting. Right? You touched it. You touched it and it feels it. See? That's how real it is. I touched the eye and it squinted. Right? Close the eye, right? It's like, whoa, my eye's closed. You touched my eye. Look what you did. That's how real it is. See? That is. Okay? So you go into set position. There's the eye. Back where it is. So when I'm touching things, I'm affecting everything I'm doing. But I'm identifying its own intelligence. I don't do this. I don't do this. I don't grab it here. Don't grab it there. It tells me exactly what it wants. And how it wants to be picked up. And where it wants to be. Maybe it wants to be with you. Maybe it wants to watch TV with you. You don't see that. You don't identify that. Until you identify what it isn't, to identify what it always is appreciate everything you have of its own setting, its own concept, its own system, guys. Its own operation settings. So very powerful when you come in that position locations. But I just told you, I just touched its eye. It didn't like that. So it went like that. It squinted by itself. So identify that. It's identified in all lines of signals and location system, all through tractions, all through locations, all through calculation setting, all through information set positions, all in its operation setting. All right, so it's very powerful when you understand what you're connecting to and what you're connecting with is how you're touching things, how you're modifying things. Are you connecting to your emotional setting when you're picking things up? Because it doesn't like that. It's like you get in positions where somebody comes up to you and basically you don't know this person, but you do know this person, but you're not identifying that through the body, but the body identifies itself through frequencies. But you're trying to figure out why this person is touching you in any way, form, or hugging you, or doing this, and you don't like that. That's invading space. Well, that's a different frequency from one to another, isn't it? Is the body consciously aware? Well, it should be, because it's always existing in its own platform, its own system. That's all the track location and settings. That gets all communications and all levels. It bounces everything that you get in positions of. Everything you come into your senses and your sensories, know exactly how to use that in travel. But everything around your system is you have to truly identify it now. As you pick things up a certain way. Okay? So it's a lot more complicated now because it's going on its own. It's creating its own modulation. It's creating its own space modulation system. It's creating its own windows of frame positions. So everything has a window frame. Now, in that position to its earth line setting, the sequence lines of grounds and sequence location system all through travel. Okay, directing lines of the film strip, process lines of indication system all through travel, communications. Ground centers, powers, atmosphere lines, position locations, atmosphere system change. Indicate line connection setting through primers and travel. Directing ground centers of sequence process indicates lines of flux over setting to 3 over setting travel. Directing ground centers line open window line frame communication high disturbance. Size communication non-configuration system to space lines anomaly and travel communications. Directing film strips 45 line angles, 45 line sequence, and ground centers set position all operation line connection set to its film strip. Directing ground centers and body frame. Each line is 4 signals, location system, and 5 travels and communication setting configuration. Setting line connection next film strip and direct line signals and location where the body goes and connection settings. Sets line cover centers and line communication setting all through travel. Okay, that's what it goes on with the body and configuration system, right? Body starts at the grounds, works with the powers, and goes to line connection setting and the next lines of the film strip as the avatar sets up the sequence. Process lines another film strip, and direct lines the calculations grounds. Again, the communication grounds, powers, and atmosphere location system all through travel. That comes in the transitions of divots and line connection information system and travel communications. Process lines indication setting, process line directed signals into pyramid active stream location system all through calculations. Directing grounds for 4 lines of flux over screen adaptations of travel and core line communication setting calculations. Then you go into platform over lines over 2. astral projections, astral travels, another pyramid line screen adaptations of flux over setting and communication to a system. Then you set up a line connection setting and position line inside travel communication. There's your platforms. Okay, so this is the film strip that the body goes through. Okay. Okay, so that's good. Inline centers, the body goes into the red line, which is security panels, process of indication system. And then it crosses over to another panel, cross line connection setting high position lines of travel. And that's bringing in a 45 angle into location grid and set travel communications. Location grid, right? Portal communications hide direct signals. Now you have to understand what the avatar does. I set location window higher self comes into location grid, which is its location setting. That modifies the system and accelerates lines of particle lines that's calculated and modified through torical fields that has to go through location grid and set position lines of portal communication directions, right? All through setting, all through operation setting and sequence and locations. Okay, all through its platform, right? But each indication lines has a different level of lines of sequence that process communication setting and cloak and dagger. 4 signals, 5 lines of 6 over lines, 8 over 12, 24 lines of signal location setting calculations. Let's bring that in lines, screen line adaptation, mind wipe, process line to 4 centers and rotation sequence locations. Bring in the map and set travel. There's the map. Okay. Process in lines inside rotation surface and travel. Okay. Walking sequence of panels, process line conditions of the body, walks in service and location setting and travel. Sets calculation ground centers and sequence location system all through set positions. So it's operation setting and sequence locations. But you have to understand how it goes through all different platforms. Okay. So once we understand the ground lines of surface, then we can really understand how to use it and all communicates to its window lines. Framing communications. Remember I told you about the 7 line centers, process lines of data, set lines of sigma, alpha, delta. 3 centers of travel. Okay. Data files, lines 3 centers of course, line direct signals of 3 grounds of surface, process indication over cross, indirect signals under cross, line connection setting and travel communications. Directing line grounds, high lines of sequence, location of panel, process setting lines of travel, 3 lines of windows, indicate position open window frames, 3 central lines and set track locations, indirections and modification, 3 doors and setting. Okay. Panel operation lines into centers of travels, pyramid activation 1, pyramid activations 2, and pyramid activations 3, and set calculations. Okay, walking sequence lines of panel, process indication lines of flux over line screen adaptation. Okay, indicate grounds, high lines of sequence over panel communications. Okay, crossing lines of angles, body goes through line centers, timeline, time jump, vortex location setting and sequence, location 3 windows and frame. Okay, correlates the calculation lines, essential line calculation setting, platforms over L, over C, over D, and track communications. Directing ground centers of service, location system, all through calculation setting, and ground lines of communication setting as surface. Indicates lines, energetic dome, upside down, and rotation upside right, and line conditions upside down, and travel communication setting and calculations. Process indication high centers, all lines of communication setting as surface. Okay. So it's understanding how to use your fail-safes and all position lines of travel into the window frames communication of the settings. Understanding the film strip that it goes through its grounds and a sequence of seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. Right? So as it comes out, it goes through its frame. So the subposition locations is setting starts from the right, okay, which is the avatar, and the body goes through this line signals. Direct and redirect at the same time. It's set lines of sequence in locations. All right. And once it goes into that, it goes into charter wave, into another wave signal, into another film strip of design lines that again, right over left, the avatar goes through and the body goes through the film strip and set design. Okay, so it's constantly going through all line communication setting configuration system, all through travel. Indirect lines and line communications. Okay. So that's how it's set up with you guys in set position. There's your pyramid, right? There's your pyramid right here. Boom. Okay. Hieroglyphics, higher channels, high operation lines of platforms, 45 angles, waving screens, adaptation of travels, and direct lines of link of communication. Okay? You have to understand your primers and how to use it in line screen adaptation of flux, cross the indication settings, high signal location setting to its road graph. Come in that position location systems all through travel. 4 signals, lines of settings, operation lines of sequence, puts all communication system in configuration system all through holographic gridding. Ground centers, line conditions, settings, flux over center, rotation lines of surface, and travel communications. Okay? Very powerful stuff in travel. Then you can see it in a different level, a 45-degree angle in line communication system all through travel. So, energetic lines of bubbles, directing lines of 3 grounds of settings into process calculation in your film strip. And set lines of travel communication and clockings of foundation grounds. It's at travel communications. All right. High signals, panels, lines, cross line connections of levels of fencing and travel communications. And directing signals into screen adaptations of ceiling, rotation setting, and surface. So it indicates cross line of angles in all communication setting and all through subtractions, all through direction. All right. And then you go inside set lines of triangulation. Okay. And again, you bring yourself in. The more you bring yourself in, the more you understand what's going on, right? You're looking at everything that's already done in sequence. You like that. So then, of course, centers, bring security lines of panels, process in positions, solar systems coming in line, rotation, service, and travel. Okay? Okay, now you can have high center location setting. Jupiter here, it's set rotation. Okay? And then we have Mercury, and set lines of communication setting. Mercury be any color. Doesn't be particular color that you want positions. You can't say line communication settings until you understand the operation of view and configuration system of attractions. And let's get in position lines as high centers, process calculation of cloak and daggers, and inside rotation, surface, and travel. Okay, you like it? Puts position location, looking at location setting through observer that you are in travel, and that rotations. And then you bring your outside line signals, and then you bring yourself in another dimension of space. Overlooking center line of communications, right? So that's you, right? Existing all at once. And again, you can set another frame, and you just basically have to go into this position as you see yourself in a bigger formation setting. Overlooking yourself again in existing informations, right? From that to that to that. Okay? All in set position lines of calculation, all existing all at once. So the more you understand the simulation system, the more you understand how to use it in all information setting and grounds and high lines of sequence that puts all communication lines of balance, all subtractions. Right? Okay, so now we have to understand how to map the signals, location of window lines. Now window line has a frame communication setting. Let's get in position of charter ways into rainbow graphs, into matrix graphs, into central graphs, into holographic grading, communication of Schumann resonance graph. All right, graph communication lines of high centers, a signal location setting of travel. 45 line angles, 1 signal, 1 ground. Timeline setting, time sequence. Cross lines, film strip of 2 line centers, 3/4 and 4/6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Add 6 lines of communication. All right. Setting course centers of film strip lines, direct lines of platforms. Set course centers of center operation lines of sequence in galaxy shift lines and online travel. Directing ground centers high line sequence into all levels of primers and circuit locations. Set signal location of 0 point lines of 1, 0 point lines of 2, 0 point lines of 3. Overline cross lines, 0 point lines of 4, and 0 point lines of 5, and set position notes operation line condition setting. Sets travels and communications service and travel communications in direction. Calculate and modify 10 lines of sequence, 0 point lines, 1 line, 7 on non-line center, line set location lines, 1 indicate lines of 0 line, operation line set location, 1 line center, line condition setting, 0 line condition lines of 4, sets communication lines, 0 lines of 5, and 1 line sequence of travel. Directing ground centers of service, process lines indication system, all through calculation ground centers, high signal location setting, and data platforms of communications and subtractions. Directing course centers, high signal location system, all through setting to energetic line condition setting to exceed 1,000 in rotation. Oh yeah, exceed 1,000. Platform over line centers, process lines of 10 over sequence, 10 over lines, 10 over line signals, 10 over line condition signals, line condition operation line sequence, crossing angles and line screen adaptations of flux, cross over lines, 0 lines of 1, 0 lines of 2, 0 lines of 3, 0 lines of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12 subtraction. Directing ground center high lines of sequence, open ball communication system, and configures and setting road graph screens and adaptation. Okay? Pyramid activation lines at 1. Process lines in open window and open frame. Okay. Indicate ground center's high signal location setting and configuration system all through 3 at travel. Directing ground center's high sequence location lines at 2 lines of set position lines of travel. Says calculation setting inline sequence, the mapping system. There's you in the set position of its door. And then you're going to go through the walking line ground centers in rotation. Follow the map and sequence location and set it in travel, right? Bring it in and set position lines of calculations. Know what's going on. All right, so we bring that in at a higher frequency. And set travel. Okay. And we change the angles, point lines of graph with communication lines of angles. Indicates system all through settings to all platforms of XT1000. Okay. Okay, so this indicates ground centers of service. So process all different angles of location system, how you see it, and all formation lines of grounds and set lines of sequence. Okay, it gets more complicated as you get more in position of your drawings and set location, pyramid in the center operations. All right, so mapping line centers, that's processed in the course, directing ground centers into delta heading. Indicate lines into purple lines, rotation lines of its map, follow the signals, location system, or travel. Bring it in sequence, location system, calculation. Okay. Coming out, line signals. Coming out, the set positions. Coming out in set positions. Coming out in set positions. It's travel. Okay, from that to that to that to that, right? And that line signals goes into the ground lines of service in crop circle, directing ground center, calculate, modify. Signal lines and modification lines of 3 centers of travels and 3 grounds of surface and set positions. Pyramid activation lines, rotation lines of service, rotate the cycles, location system, and travel communications and settings. Operation line setting, sonar, interference, rotation setting, galaxy shift lines, anomaly, rotation lines of calculations. Directing grounds of settings, security, panels, process lines of 3-2 over lines and position lines of travel. Indicate ground centers, overlooking cross location setting to position. Seeing what's going on in set traction. Okay? So you can have your overlooking system over here. You can have your overlooking system over here and travel communications all at once. Right? 3 different line communications. And then you set up a road graph screen that puts all time frame and position lines of travel. Indicate this line signals in 3 centers, 4 set line communication setting and travel communications. And then we go through road graph screens, adaptation, service, and travel communication setting. Process indication, overline, cross line, indirect signals, and ground centers of service, rotation, surface, and travel. Okay, indicates high centers of travel. Okay, so you can have 2 pyramids and rotation lines of setting and travel communications. Indirect signals and grounds. Okay, one going one way, one going the other way. All right, so I'm just getting you guys to understand how to do this in modification grounds and high lines of sequence. Process and indication system, road graphs, and rotation surface and travel. Okay. Always work with inside line rotation, and then you see yourself inside traction. Okay. Always put yourself there. Okay, where your body's always is, which is everywhere all at once. Okay. All through platform, also setting, all through operation, right? Okay, so we got to understand this aligns that communication system all through conversions and rotation lines of surface and travel. How to create it through location, do its VR set and location and travel communications. So you set lines, understand how to go through a core line is communication setting in window frames, sets lines of provision. Okay, so the more you, it's kind of like seeing yourself and making these lines of travel and knowing exactly how to go through window frames of everything set positions. So let's get an open window frame. Process communications over here, crossing angles and 3 centers of travel with 3 grounds of set calculations, right? And then you go into the other side line cycle, 2 lines of signals, over cross location inside travel, okay? 2 signal lines of grounds. Then you got the box frame in flux over lines and a V factor location system and calculations. Then you got an online sequence in location to set lines and communication of its shield. There's the shield. Process indicates inside rotation to its settings off through tractions, off through direction. Okay? Set lines of circuit, center lines of setting, operation line position of panel operation screen locations, into face facade, rotation lines, face recognition. Ground centers of surface location system off through tractions, off through direction. Booyah. Correlate the settings all through travel and direct signals and grounds of calculation. All right. So setting up the schematics is a lot more complicated now because the mind itself is becoming its own windows of itself. The earth itself is becoming its own modulation of its windows of itself. Remember, you have to understand that when we come into formulas and equations, we have to understand how to codify everything. And it's much easier to see these things, the window frames of 2 ones, lines of 3 centers of travel. Okay? So when you look at a 1, you're looking at a 1 at this angle. That's a 1 on this angle. So it's like you see in a straight view like this. But when you turn like that, you start to see the window itself. Right? And if you turn yourself again, you start to see it on this angle. Then you start to see the window on this side, right? So never see anything flat. It's all seeing angles all at once. So one strip is a 4-strip lines of anomaly. So on this angle, 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 this angle. And once you see the rotation, you see everything all at once, circulation rotations. Right? So never see a 1 like this. It's always, it's kind of, you start like this, right? Like you're up against a wall. And as soon as you do this, you can start seeing the window. See, it's a window here, right? It's an angle. See, there's always seeing in angles. Everything you see is just an angle, right? The pivotal point is U, is the center operation of U. The body is its sense location that keeps it in balance. That keeps the configuration system all through settings of course and recourse and set the lines of travel. So as you come into that position locations, you are in the center op, understanding, keeping yourself in rotations. Starting line signals, location, setting, and travel. Start with this position location of center operation, power operation, and atmosphere line communication and setting. Platforms of indication 3 grounds, process indication lines of tubing. Indicate lines of on-line centers, off-line center, inside rotation, in-ground centers of tubing. Cross lines of angles, process lines indicates 1 surface lines of tubing. Inside rotations, ground centers, set lines of sequence, off-line communication lines of tubing. Inside rotations, cross line angles, inside of tubing. So there's always ways to do this in traction. Face recognition, right? It's always a face set position. Okay? I sequence and travel. Okay? And you get position on levels of its antenna and set position of its operation. All set location of face recognition time frame. Okay? Bring it in, set calculation screen lines, adaptation, and travel. Okay? So the more you get into the drawing lines, the more it gets easier in platforms of communication. Okay? But understanding the 1-line signals or anything like communication. Now, understanding digital lines of frames, let's get into position of 2. That's a 2, right? So if a 2 is like this, and you just change the angle, you can see what's going on. It's position lines of system, and now you're starting to see this now. Set position. You're seeing the 2 like that, right? And then you see it like this in set position. Okay? So you start to see the back, you start to see the front, you start to see the side, you start to see the up, and you start to see the down, you start to see the circulation, rotation, and spinning. It's all through arrows of indication this way, set lines of this way, process this way, and set line of operation setting. It's all through 2, right? But it's a 6 too. It's a 2 and a 6. So it modifies lines of settings, both screens, and lines of 2, 26 equals lines of 1, 1 equals lines of flux, 3 lines of standby, and clocking centers of 0 gravity, 1 center in operation. And then you go set lines, coming up into this location system, bending space, all through circulation and rotations to a flywheel that processes communication system, all through Fibonacci and set lines of sequence, and all through travel. All right, so there's always ways to look at that in line communications, how you turn a 2 into a teleportation vessel. And that's what the team has to understand. Once you understand the vessel itself, then you understand the transformation of its system. Comes in its own travels of recognition of time. Comes in its own recognition system of time, of travel. All through 2 and all through 6. Okay? You can change it at different angles. You can see location grid. See location grid? Fibonacci 1 way, process the direct lines and line signals that rotates its system, location, and travel and calculations. So it's very powerful, and you're right there. That's you. observing everything. See? It's amazing how a position of a 2 and 6 turns into a configuration of a face into position of a body through E factors over H, through one line signal location of grounds in certain sequence. But you look from here, you can see it's a body. But when you bring it up, it's location of 2 and 6. See? It's pretty powerful stuff. Center sequence lines of grounds, high line signals of panels, and cross lines of 3 grounds of center core centers of divots over transformation system and travel. Directing ground centers, high line centers of platforms, 3 centers, rotation lines of set location road graphs, sets calculation over cross line connections, screen lines, adaptations of flux, inside rotations, and travel communication. Okay? And set lines of travel, here's your pyramid. Everything's a pyramid, guys. Astro projections, astro travels, astro connections, knowing how to use it, line position, location, and setting. And then we go through road graph screens. Everything has to line connect. But the more it line connects, the more you understand what you're doing in set position to its operation sequence into set travel. All 3 indication system, all 3 calculations. Okay, and you bring it in. So you look what you create on the platform. Becomes its energetic dome in set position. All right, bring it out, see what you get in position lines of travel. Okay, so now we have to understand how to modify the signals in location setting, direct signals in the opposite direct location setting in 26 over lines of 1. It indicates lines of grounds, high lines of sequence, influx over nebula, cross lines of I line sequence lines of travel. Directing ground centers in sequence comes into Quebec interference. Line core centers, remember, logging into space, logging out of space is a process of communication system that you guys have to understand how to identify that through your XD1000. XD1000 modifies the grounds, set lines of sequence, 3 lines of panels, process crop circle locates the system, multi-calculates center operation lines of setting. Sets calculations in ground centers and flywheel attractions and direct signals of ground communication of surface. So this is just black and white lines of setting all line communication of service, location of travel. But you have to indicate it through a simulation. I know exactly what you're doing in set attractions. And then you bring yourself in, observing everything you saw. Okay? You like it, you're still there. You don't, you move yourself over. Now you're over here at setting. Seeing what's over here. Right? So you're constantly in the center operation of your system. All you're doing is getting into mind over matter and processing everything, how to put everything in position of balance of sequence and online communication lines of travel. There has a direct and redirect location system of the calculations formulas of its equations that puts all indicates in system how you see that in letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay, very powerful road graph screens, adaptation, high signal locations, and platforms. Platforms that indicates the setting and grounds the surface and travel communications. Okay. Now, if I want to bring this in, I bring it in cloak and dagger. Overrides the cross line centers of angles. Then I bring in the tubing screens, 3 centers of travel, TV receptor line. Remember, communicate with the TV is a process in that set location. The TV is more powerful when it's turned off. I told you that before. So what it does, it works on its own system of its own setting, of its own travel, sets it its position location online centers. So once you turn the TV off, it's back in its distraction with your energy. But when it's on its own system, a travel. On its own system, a travel. Okay, all through TV. Okay, very powerful stuff, guys. Okay. And then you bring in color line, secure line, overline sequence, overlines of panel, cross line that indicates the setting, flux over 3 centers of travel communications. Okay, indicate grounds, and you're right there at the grounds. Right, looking at everything, the observation. See, the more you put your imagination in course, the more it has a direct line signals of what you're doing in platform. And basically, you're just putting everything on standby, but everything around you, okay, is in line signal, location, system, and travel. Okay, so that's how you bring things out. And when you bring things out, it comes out of the TV, of set position, its operation, right? Comes out, comes out, comes out, comes out, comes out. See, now it's out, right? So we get into plasma line centers, rotation lines of 1, back in, rotation of 2, back in, rotation of 3, back in set attractions. Online sequence, more story frame communications and configuration lines, you're at the top of the set position. All right. All right, so this is the location lines of settings, process lines of indication lines up in window. Location grid, and to another location grid, it gets bigger in signal locations and setting, and to another location grid in set position, its operation. Okay. Now we ground the sequence, process lines of indication setting of flux over lines, directing signals, location system all through travel, in set calculation. Okay. Change formation at grounds and sequence. So I'm constantly changing the structure of design line. And that's what you guys can do once you stand U inside the simulation of travel. Okay, and platforms. Or anything at a 45 angle. All right, it's amazing when you start to see things all through setting, all through operation, inside travel. Okay. Or threads doors of recognition. There's the door. Door, door, door. Door at the bottom. Path line rotations, and set track locations on your highways. There's your highways. So you bring yourself in again, process indication setting here, overlooking everything in travel. Okay. And then you got the next 8,000 coming in set position over here. Going out through signal. Okay. And then we get a mapping sequence lines of panel, process lines of communication setting, open up through portal communication here at travel. And it comes out. And XT1, set travel communications. Right? So all the activity happens inside lines of the simulation, guys. All right? You have to modify that. Then you bring it out, and more levels of expanding. You can expand more. You can expand more. Okay? When you go out. See? Look at all that expansion. You can't see yourself until you bring it in set position. It's operation, right? And again, you can set up your galaxy line connection setting, the service, clouds lines, bring in the clouds. Okay, bring in the clouds, right? Here's the clouds and overlines the sequence. Here's a cloud. There's another cloud. Set travel. Okay. Bring it in. You like it. Move on. All right. And cross angles, location, systemic calculation. You can add a color to it too. You know, there's a lot of things you can do in line position node settings. Over cross locations and set lines. Orange lines of sequence. So you can just constantly creating stories, guys, inside the sim. Okay. All right, and then you get a position lines of high position lines of travel. Another portal comes in line position here. Okay. Wormhole. Sequence lines of grounds, high lines of sequence location system off their setting. Process indicates the lines and flux. Black hole, line screen adaptations and attractions. Okay, so somebody comes out and sees you interactions. Hey, how's it going? How you doing? Talking to you. In set position. Okay. Very powerful when you see that, guys. See it up close. It's an ongoing activity, you know, in simulation, seconds, minutes, and hours, which you do in frame. But what you have to understand is that you're always observing everything you see. You're observing everything you see. Okay, you're observing everything you're seeing. See? Observing everything you're seeing. All right? But what you're doing through creation. You're observing everything you're doing in seconds, minutes, and hours. Change security lines of panels, process indicates and setting of flux. Set lines of A track. I don't like that. I put over a B. C over lines of D. Process over lines of A. Set lines of D. Process lines of F. Process lines of A. Set course centers A, B equals C. Right? So I just changed the flux, changed the time measure and scale. That changed the systems off the communication setting at a different angle. So you're seeing the film strip on a different angle. Okay? Seeing the film strip on a different angle. Okay? Seeing the film strip on a different angle. Very powerful stuff when you just really let things go in travel communications. Right? Anything you change, you have to know exactly what you're doing through simulation. All right? Very powerful stuff, guys. But look at all the expansion you have. And you're working with this little bit. Just that. Okay, look how big it is. Okay, and that's just one simulation game. That's just one game. That's just one platform of game with 3 settings of 3 levels. And look what you can create from inside the simulation itself. Ongoing system lines of calculation, setting, and travel communications, activity, and that settings. All right, then we work over. I'm going to observe myself again. Process over here in tractions. I'm going to work on this angle. I want to add something to its equation. Okay, so there I am. Okay, so I went from there, it looks good. Now I'm going here, right? Okay, so I bring that in. Let's change the angles in sequence. Right there, instructions. All right, work with that. That's what we'll work with, right? Okay, so I bring myself in through identification code. Add the alphabetical setting of travel. Indicate red right over sequence, 3 centers of travel communications. Indicate centers. Bring 3 lines of flux. Indicate the grounds. High sequence signs of 1. This process indicates the setting of travel. And here. And set positions over here. And another person over here and set calculations. Okay. Okay, so I like that. So I'm going to apply it to, actually I'm going to put this one over here. All right. Set sequence lines of panel communications. Right. So that's what you do. You shift the anomaly and you put it somewhere else. You're not comfortable with there, put it over there. You're not comfortable with there, put it over there. But it's on the game itself. So all you're doing is moving the directions of everybody that you bring on in sequence, through settings, and you see through operation. Okay, you like it? Here comes another portal coming in and set lines of settings. Remember, it's the seconds, minutes, and hours that you're going through frame in your simulation. Okay, so you're just creating things. So position of purple inside rotation and travel. Okay, and let's get into gold. Okay, and set travel communications. All right. Okay, then I'm going to bring in 3 centers of communications and set sequence. Okay. Gorithians. Right? Gorithians. Okay. See them? Bring it in. Okay, intelligence right there, right? So knowing exactly you're bringing in the frequencies at the same frequency, the same level, and set position, how you bring that in through configuration setting to your face facades, your set position to all of your alter egos, what you're doing in characters and players that you bring inside the game itself, the simulation through settings, that process everything location system when it comes into attractions, what has a direct line link and panel process of that communication setting to all levels of your set attractions when it comes into all levels of that set communications, all right, through its operation sequence. Okay, so constantly, then you can move yourself over here, knowing exactly what you did with your set position location, your settings, with your costume. Okay, you like what you see, then you move yourself over somewhere else. Okay, overlooking, 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 overlooking. See, overlooking, overlooking, overlooking. So each line is a different frame and set travels that you're coordinating through, right? So you see it through a box frame in set position of its operation sequence, which is its window. You focus on the window and setting a sequence, one window frame, and then you move on to the next window frame. Okay, but you take each sector vector quad at certain settings of communication. So you're looking here, you're looking here, you're looking here. All right, so you overlook here, 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 here. You're good. You move on to the next. Okay, you move on to the set positions through alterations of yourself that puts off position location what you want to do next and travel. Now, once you get into understanding that, then you create another alter ego, okay, to another costume, to another story, and set position, okay? But that's the window frame that you created, right? You like it, then you bring it out, okay? And then you really start to see yourself in observation, overlooking everything of operation setting. This is you looking at everything from everything you're looking at all at once. Okay? You like what you see? It's done. That's you looking you looking you. What you created from inside the box frame and set travel. Okay? Through the simulation. Okay? So that's what your body's doing. It's constantly going everywhere. That's the process. That's what's happening with the body itself. The body is going everywhere through its system, all through setting, all through operation. Okay, very powerful stuff, guys, going through a window frame. All right, so you like it, then you move over to another location. You can do it this way in settings. Okay, and you can move over here, bring it in, and create another box frame. And you create what's inside, right? But again, you always have to have you in first. You have to be there to observe everything you're putting in. Okay? Because you can't bring your body in. You got to bring yourself in. And yourself is already there in traction. So all you're identifying is the body has to come into its mind of projection. So it indicates settings of 3 signals, 3 centers of travel. So I have 2 lines of measure. Now we're bringing the line condition setting of the power aids. Power aids is intelligence information grounds. Okay, there's the power aids, right? And we're going to create a road ground screen, directing ground setting sequence. Panels operation of 1, panel operation of 2, energetic 3, energetic 4. So they're in their own bubbles, right? I'm looking at that through a window frame of what I created. So I'm observing everything through its intelligence information system. This is the intelligence of coloration. I'm in set lines of communication. Okay, so it's intelligence inside, remember that. The body's always in different lines of intelligence, but it's always its foundation of itself. It's not in its body, it is its body. That's the intelligence, okay? The body itself is just the outer shell. Okay, people? It's its outer shell, all right? That's the intelligence. And the conversion system is the brain inside positions. There's the brain inside rotation. Okay? All right. Let's bring in the coloration lines and settings sequence. Okay, lighting up the line centers and rotation. Now I'm going to indicate the ground centers of sequence, add new players and lines of rotation and travel. This indicates the system through one brain convergence setting to the travel communication setting line centers. The operates line sequence indicates ground center and sequence locations. Red, gold, and pink. And that's the indication that it's going to go into the brain convergence system inside traction. Okay. Inside itself, see? Inside itself. Indicates setting a travel of telepathy and signal locations. Right? So at the same measure and scale, same frequencies. The colorations I only brought in is red, yellow, and position of gold frames and lines of pink. Okay, into a box frame and set lines of travel and line screen adaptation setting. Okay, that's what I brought in seconds, minutes, and hours frame. So I like it. I overlook the system lines like, okay, so here I come again, overlooking everything I've already done. Okay, see myself in a bigger formation system of travel. That's me overlooking me, seeing what I've already done. Okay, but that's what you're dealing with is the intelligence inside. All right, the correlates schematic is sending convergence and sending a travel. Change the colors of formation lines of grounds. All right, different lines of intelligence. Now, in that modification system, all through tractions and direction, right? So there's a lot of things you have to identify how this is all set up in set positions, right? So what you have to understand, the convergent self is you. You are all colors and all lines of settings all through operation system. Starting in that positions from this setting, all through tractions. It's you dealing with you, inside tractions. Okay, very powerful stuff. So indicate settings, operation lines of sequence. Start with that travel communication. Okay. And then you panel in your sequence lines of grounds, lines of panel, operations, set locations. So this is where your body can be everywhere. And that's what we have to start identifying in the simulation and all through setting. Okay? Because it's constantly changing its form. It's constantly changing its light. It's never at the same frequencies, guys. It's at travel. All through conversions. Okay? So I can change anything informations. But I'm just showing, look what you can create through one setting of one simulation game inside of travel. 3 different levels of games itself. Off through its box window of its frame. Right? But there always has to be an onlooker of you looking everywhere in travel. Okay? So it's like you're the audience looking at the stadium. Okay, so just gives you an idea in some positions how it's set up. Okay, how powerful it is. And see it in all different angles and directions. Okay, what you create. And what you bring in. Okay? Give me a little bit more understanding how this all works. It's fantastic when you actually understand it right through Windows now. So when you understand Windows, you understand what's going on from window to window, window. This window here attached to this window here. You got 2 windows in the frame, right? And this is you over here, observing everything you're doing. Okay, so you're observing the window here, you're observing the window there through triangulation. So you need a triangulation. Okay, it's a process how this all works. From the connection settings, the process calculation system, interactions, through all levels, from general to your avatar to your body, back to general. Okay, general to your avatar of existing all informations all at once. So the avatar basically comes in position, downloads the intel. Downloads the intel to me. That's me. That's your avatar. Downloading the intel that goes to your body, which is its film strip of set design that's going through its settings, that the avatar is going through set lines as the body goes through the mechanism location of travel in directions, in seconds, minutes, and hours, in frame. Okay? That's how it works. So when your avatar is ready, it goes to me, it goes to your body, it goes to the travel. And it goes, again, the avatar does this, and then the body goes through the film strip of design, and the seconds, minutes, and hours in frame. Okay? That's why it's set up through triangulation, which is your pyramid. So setting lines, operates lines, and setting. This comes the astral projections, astral travels, and its connection system off the calculations of platforms into the simulation grounds in set direction. Okay, in platform. In set position. In set position. All at once. In set position. Okay? But it has to understand its platforms first of indication. Once it understands its platforms, then you can put everything in inset lines of the simulation itself. You inside the simulation itself. But you need to have you observing everything of what you did. This is you observing you brought things in. Okay, that's you observing. You're observing you like that. So remember the expanding that you come in positions of 3 settings of travel. That indicates locations to a location grid. The process lines and set location you want to get into your body, and you want to travel through a mechanism lines that communicates the setting, go into configuration system through Stargate and screen adaptation to its flux. And you set it up through a box frame. Set communications, right? You don't have to be in the box frame, okay? But the characters do, because you're everywhere. You're existing everywhere. You're out of the box frame. It's everything in the box frame. You have to get in position to get everything in setting, because your avatar is everywhere, not in box of anything. But you have to understand the window frames and set lines of travel. Okay? Hold on a second. Hold on, espera. 3. Yeah. Sí, Gaby.
3, ¿no?
3. Sí, thank you. Gracias. So, very powerful how we come into that position location and setting all through one window frame. Okay. Okay, the process how we use ourself in set positions, but you are not in the box frame, so you don't get confused. You go everywhere, but not attached and tethered to anything. It's everything that has to be attached and tethered before it understands what it is into what it really is you just existing and evolving yourself and expanding your systems. But you're not in a box, you're not in a triangulation. It's you overriding everything that you've seen already existing all at once that you're creating its box frames, and its mirror frames, and its tracks frames, and communication frames, and its window frames in travel. All through communication setting, and then you look again. Okay, you see yourself on a different angle. In set position. This is you overlooking everything on different angle. Okay? From that to that to that. Right? But you're never in a box frame. Your freedom and sovereignty is already set up in travel. So it's just you overlooking you. But you have to understand the box frame, it's a window frame first, so what you created. So you understand how to move on to the next system, location system, all through travel. So the more you come out, the more you're identifying the expansion of expanding your systems. All in settings, all through set position of the simulation. All through coordination of lines of set position, delta heading, all communication. Okay? But look what you do in set positions, all through observation. All through observation. And so this is you in the center. This is you in the center, but you're not centered. You're not in a circle. You're not in a square. You're not in a triangulation. You're everywhere. Everywhere you want to be. 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 That's you. That's you everywhere. But you're never in a box. You're never in a triangulation. Never in a set position of circle. Now, once you understand the particle settings, then you bring everything in center lines that communicates inside travel. Inside, 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 inside. Everything goes inside, 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 inside. Traction, 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 traction. Everything comes from inside. And you expand outside your system. So that's what it is. The basic understanding how to see yourself in all ways and forms. But if you want to get in configuration system, you have to understand the frequencies. And for you to understand the balance of that, you have to have balances in set position where you bring anything in a platform and anything through this game is setting to travel. Okay? It's very powerful. You bring it into a platform, right? Okay, so you have this on. Instructions, right? You're bringing that in, and this is you in the platform. So you have to know what you're doing, right? You're bringing that in conscious, those frequencies, right? But what you have to start identifying in that position is understand the same frequency that you're bringing in, the alteration of its ego into its story. So you have a connection system. You see it through location grid. You see it through location grid, right? You connect with each other in a triangulation flux, in position location to an atmosphere flux. Setting communication in ground centers and line communication, sending high lines of platforms and all the communication setting of flux. Process indication lines, energetic dome line communications of togetherness and tractions. Directing line triangulations, pixelation lines, ground communication setting, configuration system, and story frame and travel and communication. Directing pyramids, line rotation lines, particle lines, screen adaptations of travel, calculate and modify. Sets calculation line, high center interference, equal lines, coarse centers, ground lines of sequence location system, all through a box window frame. Okay? So basically that's how you look at yourself in travel. How to indicate the frequencies and how to connect with that setting, all through location grid. You have to have a location grid. Okay, that's how it has the connections, and it has to connect to 3, which is the connections of your avatar, which is connected to setting lines in general, that's connected to location of your body. And that's where you get your informations in travel. But general itself is operation of everything. It's not in here, but not in there, just in the mind of conscience of its awareness. Everything is set position. So general is actually this, information lines of system. Everything information setting, everything empty. Okay, just empty itself. Okay, you're looking inside. Okay, looking inside. Empty cup. Okay, empty cup, general. Inside, you bring it inside, you liquefy your system, that's you inside. That's what you're creating. And when you're creating everything aligns of anomaly, expanding your system all through travel. Okay? but you're never in position of anything in travel. You're not inside, you're not outside. You're just you, observing everything you already know. Now, once you understand that, you wake up to you. That's why I love the Superman story. When you wake up to you, you're just identifying yourself at different levels of what you created through alterations of your ego, so that you create story frames through your costumes. For you to understand how to indicate that is understand how to balance out the frequencies when you come into that positions, so you don't get confused what you're bringing in through the characters and the players that you're bringing in. It's no difference that you are a director. There's no difference that you're a narrator. You're telling a story in that positions. Day sequence of platforms, voice line grids, high lines of signals. That indicates ground centers of surface. So I'm just keeping that in file, but I'm boxing it in so nobody can take it. Because if it's exposed, anything can take it. XC1000 on their platforms can pick it up, and you have no more signal locations, right? So processing that travel. Okay, picks it up in platform. Okay, that's why you got to box everything through trifactor. Even in position, location, settings, when you come into balance the core centers of money in sequence, you have to box it in. You don't box it in as fully exposed. You box it in either way, you're going to win. You box every this trifactor, you've been in horse races. Everything that you box in, either way, you're going to win. You don't box it in, you're exposing yourself in travel. So that's what we have to start indicating, how this all works in the online communication setting. The importance of you is what you're drawing in set positions. That's how can modify how it connects the settings, location to a system, all through the inner child. Okay? So, yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yes, you can dive into anything because it's all in your imaginations, right? But you constantly, when you're doing that, you're boxing things in until you understand yourself. You have to box this in. Okay? You don't box it in. Everything around you is looking at everything you're doing, right? And it picks it up if you don't box it in. It takes it to its system of attractions. Okay, so it's very important you box things in. Then you see yourself swimming inside a T. So you see yourself on the rim, going around the rim of the T. Okay, it's in your imaginations, but you're going around the T itself. Okay, and then you vortex to your planet. That was fun. Now I'm back where I am. Right, that's what you did, right? But you're boxing things in always, always, always until you understand how to communicate yourself in traction. And that's where it comes into the mirrors, and that's where it comes into compliance, and truly understand how to see that information system all through settings, how you set that up, and all that communication system all through travels of your simulation. Okay? Overlooking everything, existing in everything informations, but it has to have a window frame. Okay? Because you're working at one sector, one vector, one quad at a time. You're working at one box frame. 2 box frames, 3 box frames, 4 box frames. But you have to be very careful because it's all connected to the system. That time status and location setting is timestamp that processes all communication lines of confusion if you understand what you're doing through your quantum system and all through the settings. So you're here. Okay, this is you. All through traction, right? Bring it in a window. And then you create it through anomaly. Inside tree, there's a car, and there's some people, right? That's what you brought in, right? So you have to understand how to create it through a box frame. And once you understand that, then you understand the imaginary line. Then you understand how to bend space. Then you understand how to bend time. But once you understand that, everything around your system just disappears. But it's still there. Right? And then, it all disappears, but it's still there. Right? That's where you can really bend space. Okay, you bend space in this angle, go on that angle and set locations. And you can go on this angle and set position lines of travel, directing lines of grounds, setting new communication schematics over lines of travel, and line communications primer and location system all through set calculations. Created in all different lines of signals and rotation lines of location grid. Create a new structure, new division location system all through travel, and direct lines of grounds and high lines of signal location system all through set position. So, But first you have to indicate the box frames. All right? Until you identify that. It's all about understanding balancing the frequencies of you, of what you're putting up, and how you see everything through a window, how you see everything through a mirror, right? And stop seeing yourself through reflection. Because if you're seeing yourself through reflection, you're in communication of emotion. There's nothing to reflection. How can there be a reflection if you are in the mirror? That doesn't make any sense. It's you looking at you. The body knows exactly what it is, but the actual setting is you inside. So how can that be a reflection if you actually you in the simulation? That's everything of its game itself. So that's you on all platforms of existing all at once into the location grid. So how can that be a reflection how you see things? No, it's the other way around. It's understanding yourself. So this is you outside observing everything. Next level. This is you existing all at once in set positions. And once you identify yourself, then you identify yourself inside the game. And once they have a collaboration, they communicate with each other through technology. And again, through triangulation in set positions, also general, which is everything in mass of communication. Common interactions, directions. Now you sync your line center location system. Now the intelligence goes inside the system. So the mirror itself becomes the modification of itself in reality of its location of settings. Check this out. That's what happens. Merge instant one. So there's no more mirror. Never is a mirror. But you morph into yourself through your own technologies, and then you process that through an indication system. And general overlooks everything in travel. Okay, through triangulation. Everything has to be a triangulation. So the more you understand that, the more you see yourself as your avatar downloading these into your body. It comes in all formation lines of balance and all through communication setting and high attractions. That's the tether, that's the attachments to setting, location setting to your server that's connected to my mainframe. That process communicates how you see it through your domain to my master domain. That puts everything in the location of balance of communications and travel. Okay? That's it. All right, sending lines of panel, process lines of indication setting simulation grounds. I'll go through the compound, cross location setting, classification A, level D. See you in 5.